Welcome to the Process Tool Showcase. So who are Labria? Labria are an independent consultancy that provide process mapping consultancy, training and facilitated workshops. We have clients ranging from defence, manufacturing, education, IT, software vendors, as well as small businesses. So why do we use a process tool? Well, we all recognise the value of documenting business process, but why use a specific tool? As an independent consultancy, we use many different tools depending on the several factors of a project. So we use one tool for projects that are self-contained with isolated end-to-end process, projects requiring cross-functional processes that reside in a wider library, and projects requiring processes that have an audit trail of completion. We could use any number of generic ways of documenting processes using Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or even Excel, but these tools were not specifically designed for process maps. Using a tool will help achieve the required outcome quicker and more effectively than using the standard Office suite. Process tools are not a one-size-fits-all. To showcase some of the tools we use, we're going to use the same client brief for all three tools. So the client has asked us to document the HR onboarding process, including documents or forms used. In this first example, we will look at HR onboarding being an isolated process that is end-to-end, but not part of a wider interconnected enterprise library. For this, we use a solution provided by a company called Skore, and this is how Skore works. The first tool that we're going to be looking at is provided by a company called Skore. Now, Skore tend to focus more around process mapping projects rather than end-to-end enterprise solution. So we're going to create our first process to do with HR, and that is to recruit a new member of staff. So I'm just going to go up here. It's all fairly intuitive. It doesn't take very long at all to get yourself up and running. So here I'm going to call this recruit a new staff member, and this will form part of the process title. Now, within the setup of this machine, we've also got some branding associated with the process, but it's very, very simple. So if I start here with looking at the process itself, and we start by looking at this view mode, so I can't make any changes to the process. So I'm going to go into edit, and very, very simple palette of shapes. So we have the what box, which is effectively activities, so these are the tasks and the things that you do, and we have a Y box, which are going to be the outputs of those tasks. We can also add notes, or if you want to make your process a little bit more attractive, you can start adding things like images to that as well. So with any process, we can always add a Y to start with. So I'm going to start my process with a vacant position. And a very neat, tidy tool here, or a shortcut, is we can actually create the next box in a sequence. So we can't have two what boxes together or two Y boxes together. And by having just pressing the spacebar, I can immediately link onto my next activity. So the first activity then is going to be to obtain authorization to recruit. And you'll have to excuse my spelling and the speed of my typing here. And it's given me a Y box, so I've got a so that, and the output of that is going to be our approved job advert. And again, just double clicking each of these boxes. And I can go on to the next stage of the process. I can then look to select my candidate, which gives me an informal job offer, before I can then make my formal offer, which will give me then a new employee. Now this is, at a high level, a very, very simple, straightforward process. You can also see underneath these what boxes is who does it. So if I just click on the what box again, underneath who does it, I can see here it wants a job role. So here I'm going to have my line manager, and then the recruitment process moves then into the recruitment team. So we're going to have our recruitment manager, and again ultimately we'll have our recruitment manager making the formal offer. Now you'll notice that as soon as I start building out the process, any job roles I've used in this process are available to me in a drop-down list, which is quite a cool feature. So there's a simple straight line process all the way through, but actually we want to go into a bit more detail. We want to break it down. To obtain authorization to recruit, so there's a little drop-down button at the top here, which when I double click it takes me into a lower level map, which I can start adding flesh to it. Now my inputs and my outputs are all available to me, so I can just click on my input and I'll have my output at the far right hand side, and just start dragging the process in. So here's my first what box, which is going to be obtain approval to recruit. From the management team. Now Skore talk about capturing process at the speed of conversation, and it is actually really quick to get a map together. Certainly if you're doing this over the phone or working remotely, we can see a real speed of what to do. You have to forgive my typing here. So next I'm going to have my next what box, so then I'm going to prepare my job advert. And then I'll have a job description. And then my final stage is to obtain approval. Now you do have to double click into the boxes to actually edit the text. You can't just simply select them. Now within Skore there is no concept of decision points. We've only got these what boxes and why boxes, so no branching. We can have multiple connections coming out of shapes, but there's no concept of the decision diamond. So if I look here at the functional manager, and the next step is we're going to delegate that down to a functional assistant. Now my browser here is doing a spell check for me. It just picks your default language, whatever you're picking, and then obtain approval. Again, I'm going to say as my functional manager, and just picking neatly from the drop down. Now that's great, But if I wanted to add some documents to this, I can actually do it really easily by clicking on the little paperclip icon, and I've got my documents held on a server somewhere else. So here, if I look at my authority to recruit, I'm just going to pick a URL and I'm just going to paste my URL from where it lives. And here's my authority to recruit form. Very, very simple. You'll also see up in the top we've got this breadcrumb trail which tells you exactly where you are in the process hierarchy. Let's just come back up to the top level. This is saving as we go, so I don't even need to remember to hit the save button at any point. But it's building up a database of shapes. So if I take a look at some of the other functions across the top here, and if I look at the roles, I can see actually how many job roles we've got and the actual names of them. So I've got a functional assistant, functional manager, a line manager. So I've got potentially a mismatch of job roles in here, so I can tidy that up, and a recruitment manager. We can also see across the bottom is who hands off. So in this case we've got a line manager that hands off to the recruitment manager at this top level, and if I come down a level, so again if I go into my what box and I look at my reports or look at the roles, again I can see my line manager goes to the recruitment manager, and that in turn goes to the recruitment manager. Like any tool, there's always more that you can do with it. I'm showing you just the standard tools which are available in the starter side of the system, but you'll notice across the top we do have some analytics functions which tells me how many what boxes and why boxes, diagrams, and deepest levels of view. I can also look at some reports, and this is quite useful again for seeing things like attachments, where they exist, where the URL is, the idea of the shape, and what type of attachment. Along the way we can also have comments on the process. Now these are once you're in a wider workspace. If you want to provide feedback on the process as another editor, you can do that. So broadly speaking, there are other functions as well to do with analysis. So if we look at the quantify side of the tool, this is one of the more premium features, and I'll just show you one of the quantify reports that we can see in the system. So there's our process, and it gives us some great visuals about how long the process takes to do, how much it costs, and the activities, the most expensive activities, and breaking down into lower processes and lower activities too. We can also look at the cost per hour to get the overall cost in. So that's a very, very high level view of what Skore is, and there's always more information available on their website. The next tool will map the process in bite-sized sections and can link several processes together. Provided by a company called Triaster, the platform is divided into two areas: the authoring side, which is called Process Navigator, and the process library, where content is presented to end users. And we're going to look at how Process Navigator works. The next tool we're going to look at is provided by a company called Triaster. Now Triaster have two sides to their software. They have the authoring side, which is called Process Navigator, and they have a process library, which is where all of your created content is stored. Now I'm going to focus on the authoring side of the software for this session because it is free to download and free to use, and it sits on top of Microsoft Visio, so you will need Visio installed on your machine as well. So this is the map control console, and I'm just going to create a new process for HR. And if I click on the create a new process, and Visio will then open for me. Now you'll notice that I do have a branded look to the drawing page, just to make it a bit more personal to our organisation. So starting off then, we can see the shapes down the left hand side. These are all the shapes we're permitted to use on our drawing, fitting into 3 basic families. So we have activities, so these are things that we do. We have deliverables, which are things we use and produce. And then we have hyperlinks, which link us off to other resources. Now if we start with the title of the process, so in this case I'm going to look at obtaining authorization to recruit. And processes always start with a deliverable or a trigger point. So here we're going to start with a vacant position. Now it's always difficult to talk and type at the same time, so please excuse me for that. It's like rubbing your stomach and patting your head, or is it the other way around? And so now we obtain approval from the management team. And you'll notice underneath the activity here, I have a white box which is showing me who's responsible for the task, and I can see a red warning triangle indicating that data has not been completed. So if I look at what that is, it's looking for responsibility and accountability. So if I put in here who's responsible is going to be the functional lead, and the accountability is going to be the functional manager. As soon as I enter both those fields in, that warning triangle disappears. So then I'll have my next deliverable, which is going to be assigned. Oh, let's get my case sorted out. Authorization to recruit. So it's now I can then copy this shape and prepare my job description. Working my way through the process again. It sounds obvious, but we always need to ensure that we have outputs from every activity. So we are going to have our job description. So this is something you could actually show me. And then we are going to build the job advert and submit for approval. And the final stage is it's actually going to give me, this is going to be a draft job advert. And I wanted to have a decision point at the end here to say, are there any changes required? And I've used an activity there, and really what I should have done is use a decision, so I can actually change a shape from one shape to another. So now I can say that there are changes required, or we have an approved job advert. So very simple, just drag and drop. And what we can do now is we can link the process together. Now I'm just using a standard Visio connector tool. There are different ways of connecting shapes together, but just for speed, just going to show you how to connect shapes up. And we can connect onto different faces, as you just saw there as I caught the bottom of a shape, but we always tend to put inputs into the left and outputs out the right. And where we've got changes required, we can actually link that back to build the job advert. Not particularly attractive on the screen, but a very useful function within the Triaster system is this thing called auto layout, which will align the map straight on the page. Right at the bottom, I can see that I have process owner, process number. All of these are data items, so I can just populate that. And if I put in the head of HR, is the process owner, and the process number, we're going to call this HR 032.11. And that information there appears at the bottom of the map. We can also do things like linking out to documents. So if I add a hyperlink to this activity, I can then find a document that lives on my machine, and it's looking for Visio files to start with, but we can actually point at an Office file. And now here's our authority to recruit, and that will link off to a document. Very, very simple and easy to do. So I'm just going to save this away. Now this is what I call a small bite-sized chunk of a process. This is all relevant to the functional lead or the functional manager, and doesn't involve any of the other steps of selecting the candidate or making a formal job offer, because it's not really relevant to them. The advantage of the Triaster platform is we can start linking processes together via what we call an end-to-end process. And I'm just going to now copy the title of that. I'm going to just save this away, drop it in my HR folder. And we can see that the output deliverable here is an approved job advert. I'm going to add some other processes that I've created earlier on, which will link to this. And I'm just going to close that down. And if I look back at my map control console, I can see I've got my select candidate and make the formal job offer. I'm going to link these processes together. It's very, very simple and easy to do. And then I'm going to do something called refresh the off-page connectors. So let's take a look at that map that I just created a moment ago. So this authorization to recruit, if I open the map up, you see right at the end of the process, Process Navigator is automatically detected. There's another process to link to, and if I take a look at that, it's going to select candidate. Now that's great. We talk about process maps flowing through at what we call the seabed level, but if I'm a manager and I want to get an overview of the HR process, it'd be really good to see this in one map. And Triaster has a really useful function here to draw those processes up into a higher level. So if I take a look here at generate the next level, I can take all three of those lower level maps and create a HR overview. Very, very clever, is it takes the process names and the inputs and outputs from the lower level and will create you a top level overview. What it doesn't do is it doesn't populate the responsibilities of the activity or put in any of the process owner or process numbering. It wants you to do that as a human. It just takes a couple of seconds to run, and we can see the other processes. If I just maximize that up, that we link to. So here's my approved job advert, and it links to a rejection list, a rejected candidate, and a job offer that's been made to the candidate. These become drill downs into a lower level. So if I look at obtain authorization to recruit, and I can just double click to go down on that, it takes me to the lower level, which is a map that I created earlier with my hyperlink, which goes off to another process, or I can go back up to the top level. So very simple, very powerful, very easy to use authoring side, and free too. So that's Triaster Process Navigator. The final tool is designed to keep track of not only the process but also the tasks along with it, and provide an audit trail and a record of completion. These can be used to prove compliance to a process. Provided by a company called Process Bliss, this is how it works. This is Process Bliss. Process Bliss is unlike other process tools where it doesn't focus on the inputs and the outputs. It focuses on the tasks that are performed. The processes themselves are created using templates, and we're going to create one now. And I'm going to use the option here just to create a new template, and I'm creating it in my showcase organization, and I'm using a HR process of obtaining authorization to recruit. Now, very simple. We start at the beginning with the steps. So the first step I'm going to do is to obtain approval from the management team. And that immediately follows on to prepare the job description. The next step then is to build the job advert. And obtain approval. Now, instead of adding a step, I can now add a decision, and that decision is going to be, is job advert acceptable? And I've got my yes, which will take me on to the next stage. If it's not, I can loop back into building the job advert. Now I'm just going to correct a typo in here. It's very easy, very intuitive to tool. By just double clicking in the field, I can make any corrections to capitalization. The software is not case sensitive, it's quite forgiving in that regard. If the job advert is not acceptable, we loop it back round. If it is acceptable, then we'll go on to the next task, and we shall release the job advert to the media. Now at the moment, we've got a very nice straightforward process. Not much different to anything you could do in Visio, or you could even do this in PowerPoint. But where the value comes in Process Bliss, not only do we have the audit trails, but we can add attachments. We can add attachments to process steps. So if we look at prepare the job description, instead of asking people to go and find the job description, I can add a file. And if I look at the desktop and I look at my job description, I can actually provide the template that they need. If we go on to the next step, I'm just going to return to the list. We can build the job advert and obtain approval. And rather than just having these steps going through one after another with no constraints to them, we can set some importance on them. Now the importance will mean it's an essential step. The essential step means it cannot be skipped without giving a reason why this hasn't been done. And is the job advert acceptable? Again, it follows the same rules. Once I've got this template created, now this is for obtaining authorization to recruit, and this could be for absolutely any role. I'm going to publish this. Now publishing allows me to create tasks and assign it to an individual. So what I'm going to do now is create a task for recruit a new developer and assign it to me. I'm also going to put a due date against it for a couple of weeks time, and I'm going to publish that. So that's all there is to creating the process in Process Bliss. It's that simple. If I come back to my task list now and I have a look at all of my tasks, I can see obtain authorization to recruit, and the task that I've called it is recruit a new developer. And the first step here is to obtain approval from the management team. Now I'm going to go off to my meeting and going to discuss that verbally with them, so I'm just going to tick that as being done. Now if I prepare the job description, I can actually take a look at that. I can see there's an attachment there, and I can open up that job description and complete it. Once I've done so, I can click it and mark it as ticked. One of the other options within Process Bliss is to be able to upload completed documents to a point on your own network, which will allow you to have an audit trail to show when it's been done and by who. Now, if the job advert is not acceptable, and I mark that as a no, it takes me back round to building the job advert again, and I can keep going round and round the cycle until it has been marked as complete. And then once I release it to the media, I can mark the whole process as complete. Now, one of the steps here is it's saying it was to build the job advert, which I skipped. And because it's a mandatory step, it's flagged it back to me. So if I say it wasn't done and I didn't have enough time, and I can confirm that, and it will now allow me to complete that task. Now if I go back to the templates and go back to my showcase, and I'm going to go back into my authority to recruit again, and this time I'm going to create a new task to recruit a project lead. Now when I publish this, I'll be able to go back into my task list, and I can actually see that I've got a second task appearing in the list. And I can mark the task as complete, and this time it's gone straight through without a problem. If I'm the manager of the HR team and I want to see how many processes have been successfully completed, I can actually go back into the templates, look at the obtain the authorization to recruit, and look at the reports. So in this particular case, I can see that recruit a new developer has been done. It's based on the same template. So the first step was done by me at a certain time, so was the second, but the third step wasn't done, and we can see the reason there: didn't have enough time. And we've also got this feedback loop of, is the job advert acceptable? The second time round, we're going to recruit a project lead, and we can see that went straight through. The more processes you have, the more you can report on these. We can also export them out to a CSV file, so you can do a bit more of a deep dive on how well your processes are performing. So lots more functionality available within Process Bliss. There's up and coming. There's also a library of templates, so you don't have to go through and recreate everything. So if we take a look at some of the ones that we've got already, so if we look at some that have been created by Labria, we can look at, we've got make a formal job offer, initiate recruitment, and adding an employee to the payroll. So that is Process Bliss. Hopefully now you've seen 3 tools that you may or may not have seen before and have a good idea of which ones to use for what purpose. Now if you want any help or support, Labria are offering a free 1-hour consultation to discuss your processes with you to see where your gaps are. We're also offering a Kickstarter to your process discovery, where we can map with you one of your basic processes to get you started on the journey, which is going to be £100 plus VAT. We could also help you build up your process collection with support to identifying business critical process, which will be captured and shared as part of an online workshop at £395 plus VAT. If you'd like more information, please get in touch with us. Thank you for watching.